Let's see, is everyone here then? What do we got? Yep. Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6:07. Roll call. Everyone is here. Adoption of the agenda. Does anybody move to adopt the agenda? Or anyone have any changes they'd like to make?
I move to adopt the agenda.
I second.
All right, if we don't have any objections, we'll keep moving. I have one announcement. I think everyone on the committee is aware, but Karen Hardesty did resign from the committee due to personal reasons. I did not have time to put together anything to replace her yet, so I think when we brought Steffi and Elise on at the board meeting, they pointed out that the committee should be picking the replacement committee members. So next meeting, I will bring forward our applications and we can go about selecting someone. So yeah, that's the only announcement I have. I don't know if anyone else has anything. So continuing business, I'll just maybe let Steffi and Elise introduce themselves. At our first meeting, we kind of just said a little brief tidbit about ourselves quickly and introduced ourselves, if you guys want to do that quick.
Sure. Yeah, happy to be a part of this committee. My name is Elise Rylander, and I live in Gate 3, and I work in the outdoor industry. So right now I work for a company that advances equity across active outdoor industries over the broad outdoor rec economy, and I manage our corporate, nonprofit, and small business partner portfolios. So working in the outdoor industry, I also love to be outside and love to be at Lookout Mountain biking or hiking or paddling or walking around, which I've been doing a lot in quarantine.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you.
Welcome, Elise.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Okay, I'm Steffi Jones. I live in Gate 3 also. I am a mom, a grandma, a nurse, and case manager, educator, that type of thing. I'm excited to be a part of this, and yeah, I bring a lot of enthusiasm. Let's just say that. Okay,
welcome,
anyway,
Steffi.
thank you guys. Thanks.
All right. So moving forward, I put appointment of terms back on the agenda. I don't know. We don't have a full committee, even with Karen resigning at that point. Maybe it's best that we just kind of move forward with what we got going on right now. Get a full committee, we can discuss that. I don't know how anyone else feels about that. Everything's kind of crazy right now with the pandemic and stuff, and I then had to cancel the last 2 meetings because I was, like Kim just said, the last week for her, I was just booked for like 2 months with personal commitments and then just trying to maintain my board commitments, and didn't want to waste any of your guys' time with being underprepared. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add in on that.
Hey, I think Scott's talking. Oh, sorry, Scott.
No, just cleared my throat.
Oh, sorry.
Perfectly understandable would be the only comment I would offer. So I think our gap in the last couple of months is certainly understandable.
All right. Well, and my apologies because I couldn't get my, for some reason it's not working with my laptop, and sorry for the jiggling because I'm holding my iPhone. I'll get it set up and quit moving pretty soon. But The only thing about the, I just want to be sure that we don't bump into a problem because the bylaws talk about that we have to do that. So I just think that sooner rather than later, just so that no one says we're not a formal committee or something because we didn't actually fully implement the committee and the terms.
Yeah, I think, I think the board's approved everyone to be on the committee, and if we're all in agreement that, things are a bit crazy and we're just gonna this is kind of what happened last year as well. No one really wanted to commit, and, we're in an even far more interesting predicament, in these days than what we were last year. I have a hard time asking everyone to just be like, oh yeah, 3 years, let's do it. So.
AJ, I am perfectly comfortable with you making the decision on who serves how long. Just do it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I feel like we could easily say 3 years. It's not like you can hold anyone to this if they resign. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think it does, and it's like I don't know how many 3-year terms, but there's 2-year terms, and you and AJ still have 2 years left. Boy, this is not working for me. Look at that. But anyway, you guys still have 2 years left, so there's 2 terms. Those are 2 years right there. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, we can juggle it. I just want to be sure again that there's no question that this is a formal committee. I know that came up last night, this strangeness about not being able to have a committee unless, it was improper for the board to have a committee that had 2 directors, when in reality, state law requires that any actual committee, official committee that's formed by the board has to have 2 board directors. And so, there's all these little tiny things, and I just want to be sure that we're not doing all this work and then somebody says, oh, well, we don't officially recognize anything you guys did. So that's my concern.
Okay. Well, at this point, I guess I'm not really prepared to just appoint people terms at this point, but we could certainly discuss it and present something at the next meeting.
I was just going to add, this is like our 3rd meeting, so it's really hard we haven't really gotten into the meat of things. It's hard to make that commitment, but if it becomes a problem, we can all just throw something on a piece of paper for the sake of, but I just feel like we haven't really gotten going yet. I still have lots of questions about who we are and what we do, but as long as it's not going to be a problem, maybe by the end of the year, we'll all have a better idea of what we're doing, and then we can sign on for more time if that's permissible.
Okay. All right, well, I don't want to take up too much time unless anyone else has anything pertinent they want to throw in worrying about this. I think we got a couple kind of more pressing things that are better for our time to discuss. So moving to the mission and vision statement, I know we got 2 new people on here, and a few of you have written in some comments, and there's been some comments on some of the social media posts that I made, and so I think I'm going to kind of maybe just open the floor to what anyone wants to talk to about regarding the mission and vision statement. I don't really expect us to hash this out and have it tonight. We obviously don't even have like any sort of rough draft created of any sort of revision at this point. So I was just going to kind of leave the floor open if anyone wants to add anything pertinent to the discussion. And then we can continue. We can let Elise and Steffi kind of chew on the existing one a little bit more. And if they want to provide any feedback on that, and we can kind of just continue to iteratively work on some of this stuff moving forward. What's up, Joe?
Do you want to keep notes on the changes that you guys want to make so that we can compile all that for the follow-up on this next meeting, so we can get everything kind of in line and ready to go?
Yeah. My plan was to kind of I got a kind of the start of it, and I'm like halfway through kind of compiling kind of the rough thoughts of everyone that has responded. And then, you know, if anyone else still has anything they'd like to add as input, we can do that, and then we can kind of compile something, and then my thoughts were kind of just to propose like basically a revised statement, you know, that kind of includes some of the important points from a variety of people, and we can kind of start to call things down from there.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we weren't in this COVID, we could throw it up on a whiteboard and start writing it down from there. But
Andrew, I sent, and this was probably a couple of months ago now, but I
Yeah.
sent the draft. Is that on the drive, that the suggestions that I sent
I
by email?
don't think I got that on the drive yet.
Okay.
I'll have to do that, and I'm not sure that everyone was able to access the drive either.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to have a Google account after. It seemed like everyone that had Google accounts didn't have an issue, and the people that didn't may have. So
That is my experience with using Google Drive, and
I don't know if anyone knows of any other
senses,
ones
so,
that don't need. I suppose everything's going to need a specific login.
Dropbox, you need an account. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, as long as they have a Gmail account, so just you can create a Gmail account and then you know, use the Google Drive shared drive that way. So Zoom, like I said, I can't get on for some reason. I you know, have to have magnifiers, and so I think that they're for some reason not cooperating with the camera today. But I can log into Zoom, and we can do a shared screen, which works like a whiteboard, and be able to you know, work those documents in real time. I just can't get it happening tonight, but you know, we can do it next time.
I think that's good. We can get all the ideas up there and start whittling them down and condensing them and get it down to something a little bit more workable.
I think that'd be a good idea, Sonia. Yeah, I think I forgot that you can do the share screen stuff. So, yeah, we can look into that for a future meeting. You know, I think to some extent, some of the comments have been, you know, Kim provided some comments on, you know, kind of. It was actually very intriguing, kind of a whole shift in the paradigm of like the way the association would kind of function. And then we got a couple emails from people with kind of more simple statements of things that they'd like to see added in. And so I'll compile all that up, and we can try to figure out the shared screen thing for a meeting here in the near future, and work on kind of a group think of going through that. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to this at this time?
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think, first of all, we should do whatever it takes to get Kim's work in everybody's hands as quickly as possible. It was, you know, as you suggested, AJ, you know, pretty provocative. And not to color anybody's thinking, but Kim, I concur with I think the basic premise. Let's be enterprising and do whatever it takes to minimize our dues. But I guess my own opinion is I think we need to be realistic. I don't think we're going to ever replace the dues structure. I think we could augment revenues in a pretty significant way, which then reduces dues assessments. So, I think it really is some careful word choices, maybe some edits to what you created. And again, thank you for doing what you did. But the one note that I kept making to myself is rather than, I don't know, I don't want to get into wordsmithing this right now, but it was promote. Let's promote this, not make it a mandate that we do away with traditional dues collection. And correct me if I'm misrepresenting anything that you wrote, but anyway, the fundamental point is I think it's a great starting point and a great running start at the mission and vision edits. So whatever it takes to get that in membership's hands, let's do that quickly.
I think no matter, am I on mute? Sorry. I think no matter what we do, we're going to have to be prepared to, make edits and adjustments, because that mission and vision statement is going to reflect whatever feedback we get from the community. So yeah, we can roughly draft it and what we kind of predict the direction to be and what we think are good goals. But I think we also have to be open to making changes. But we definitely have to have a direction to work in.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? All right, well, kind of keep moving on here. The next agenda item was just the elements of the long range plan. This is something I just kind of, similar to the mission and vision statement, going to kind of keep it on as like an iterative discussion. Some meetings we may have nothing to really talk about. I'll just say that I'd sent you guys kind of I wouldn't even call it a draft at this point. It's like the first couple pages of like kind of a long range plan, trying to take the elements that we've been talking about that we think are important to incorporate and start to kind of create the like actual legitimate document and start populating some of our work as we go along into it. And I am not the like fancy, make everything look super nice. So I'm, gonna probably just be pretty rough with it. And then, I don't know, maybe hoping Joshua Bowens can use his magic graphic work that he does to make things look nice and pretty eventually. I think at this point, see the main elements of the long range plan. Let's see, I gotta pull it up here quick. I didn't get that one. So at this point, we've been talking a lot about community engagement. And that's a lot of the surveys. We've talked about neighborhood and organizer network, the website, census data. We talked about mission and vision statement being a part of our long range plan, community goals and both needs and wants. Some of that goes and ties back into kind of the results of the surveys that we would be trying to implement. Capital spending is a big portion of it, and the board is actually directed long range planning to start looking at some of our facilities and how we would deal with like the dance barn, the maintenance building, and some of these large projects that were added to the capital program last year, and looking at alternatives to that. We've talked about revenue sources, both from dues, non-dues revenue, grants, special assessments, were all things we felt like we should discuss. Community safety was a big thing, both with the natural disasters, our road network, and as well as the wildlife that we have here. And then Mike DeVolio had sent an email, discussing that a main component of a long-range plan is land use planning as well. And so that's kind of the elements that we have on the long-range plan now. I'm always open at this point. We can talk about, we think there's other things we should add to that, or, I just kind of have it as a running list at this point for things to like kind of continue to keep working on.
AJ, I want to thank you for adding that future land use element. I think it's really critical, at least from my perspective, because we really don't know where we're going until we know what we have. And I think that the inventory that would be a part of that future land use plan will be critical for that to succeed. And so I'm willing to spend as much time as you need me to work on that section of the plan. I also wanted to mention that I've read through all of the capital facilities information that you sent. And one of the things that struck me the most is that in all of the budget document and in all of the construction documents, I didn't see a single RFP.
Right.
So I don't know how, for example, Wilson Engineering was hired. I don't know how any of the contractors that were doing any of the work were hired. I don't know how any of that was budgeted for ahead of time without knowing who might be potentially be doing the work. And I want to know, it's really important to know how that's going to be handled in the future. I mean, I don't know how long, for example, the contract with Wilson Engineering is, whether that's up for renewal at some point in the near future.
I can chime in on that.
Over.
Wilson is no longer affiliated with Sudden Valley. I terminated them when I got there for a lot of the same questions that you had.
All right, thank you.
And then
Those are
just
really great
correct me if I'm wrong, but Joe, we normally, for putting a construction contract, we put that out to advertisement, right? Or do we send that to specific contractors?
They never did here, but that was something I found, again, very odd. Anything with a big project like that, you would want to put out for a major bid, especially if you're going to do the dance barn or the maintenance center. Something of that scope of work should be a public announcement. So I don't know if they never did, but that is something that I'm very used to doing when I was back east. Anything big projects like that was sent fully out.
I would imagine, I work in design and construction, and I would imagine that Wilson probably kept, if they did a bid for contractors for, a project, they probably put it out, and provided several bids. But to me, that's just like second nature, though. I mean, I could go and show you, the past 20 shoreline projects I've done and bids from 5 different contractors for each one. And I guarantee you the lowest or the highest was not selected. It was
right.
The one that put together the best package.
The most qualified bid.
Yeah. And for the record, Joe, at first, I appreciate that what you've done. I've worked with Wilson in the past. When I was planning director in Line Lake, for example, we used them on a couple of projects, and I was always happy with their work. I'm not saying anything against Wilson, but the process just seemed a little sketchy to me.
Yeah. I was not happy with the stuff that I saw. And I will leave that at that. If you want to come in my office and sit down and go over some stuff, I would be glad to do that one-on-one, but not in an open meeting.
Got it. Thank you.
So
I can attest to good and bad experiences with Wilson as a consultant, but that's, again, on the side.
So
mine have always been bad. So that's my perspective.
Okay, so I guess just to back it up just a hair, Does everyone understand, like, basically what we're directed to do according to the bylaws? Because I think a lot of this is covered under that. And all that being said, there's a lot of pieces to it, a lot of components of what you just brought up, and everybody in this committee has expertise in certain areas so I think maybe when we start breaking those projects down, and that, what you're talking about, Mike, just like you and AJ, like there's certain things that it might be better that we have little tiny subcommittees or task force that can focus on their areas of expertise, and then kind of bring it back and to the whole committee. So that's part of, I think, what we kind of put in our planning is kind of who's going to be in charge of what, right? That might make some of that easier, like who's reviewing the roads or the roads contract and the expenses, and who's looking at parks and trails and all of that. Adam's got a lot of experience with that, and I just think we need to make sure that we're letting some of these people lead where they have the information.
Sorry for being dim, but why is that a long-range planning function?
Well, long range, we're tasked with the long-range strategic planning of this HOA. And so unless the bylaws are totally rewritten, that's actually what we're supposed to be doing.
I don't think that's analyzing every RFP. I think long-range planning, what that implies to me is, 3, 5, 10-year horizons. Let's look beyond the trees right now to figure out what the community wants and needs.
Right, I agree with that. But I think one of the reasons that, you said something in your email where you said, we need to look at why we've not ever been able to implement a successful long-range plan. I think it's because they've not been achievable. We're not looking at them realistically. I've looked back over at these plans. They're kind of vague, and they're not set. So let's say that you have a 3 or 5 or 10-year plan, but then how do you get there? And do we have the money to get there? And does the community want it? There's so many elements to be sure that we want to put together the actual future roadmap that's going to be successful and achievable going forward, so that a lot of the turmoil and constant change and unpredictability that we all are frustrated with stops, right? So we have to build that plan where we know it can be successful. And part of that is we have to be realistic about what's profitable or what's not serving the community anymore, and help make those decisions. So it does actually involve long-range planning.
And I agree, Scott. I don't think we need to be, I don't expect long-range planning to be diving into RFPs. Capital requests go through finance and the board already. I think to some extent, I think Mike was just kind of clarifying our procurement process a bit for both consultants and contractors, which I think we had that discussion at one of the last meetings. I think it's important that we all understand what those procurement processes look like, and what the results can and can't be by using those methods. And I think to a large extent, we probably should just follow kind of how local jurisdictions handle those types of things. We put big construction contracts out to bid, and take bids in and, evaluate bids. Local jurisdictions have to bid to the lowest bidder. We don't have all those same rules and stuff.
I'm all
like
good
that,
with that. And it clearly, I think, Joe has improved upon the process, and I have no quarrel with any of those aims. I'm just trying to figure out what is appropriately our purview as long-range planning, and I'm a little fuzzy about what level of detail, the audit function, for lack of a better word, that we should have here. So I think, Sonia's point and question is absolutely valid, is I think we need to figure out, what exactly are we and are we not?
Right,
To
and
go
I agree.
forward.
None of us want to be into the daily operations and micromanaging at all. It's really about making sure whatever we do, that it's achievable, and that's where Joe's going to come in. And yeah, no, I don't think any of us want
not
that.
only achievable, but also, part of what the community really wants. And to kind of get back to AJ's initial thoughts here, is that how do we get to the point where we understand what the community truly wants? And my position has always been that we need to have that survey out there. We need to be getting as much information from as many members as we possibly can in a short amount of time, so that we can start filling out all this information about, what is in the mission and vision statement. What are these, I think Sonia mentioned, if we have little subcommittees related to various aspects of the community, and get people starting to dig into the details of all of those things that the community wants. What do they need? And all of those aspects. To me, that's critical, is finding out from the biggest section of the community as we can, what it is they want Sudden Valley to be as we move forward into the future.
And I also, to the point of defining who we are and where our parameters are, I just wanted to add to that conversation that we were forwarded an email for the Barn 7 replacement timeline, and that was to me like, okay, why are we getting this? And
Nancy sent that to me, and she wanted me to share that with you. I just forwarded along.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, okay, are we part of that too? So I mean, I just feel like
mostly just an FYI.
Okay, because I was like, okay, now are we supposed to get involved with the barn replacement? But
actually, we are, because that's one of the things that that's what AJ was talking about.
The board has tasked us with looking at that stuff.
Right, and so
just to reiterate, what the bylaws do say is, the bylaws talk about a formal assessment of the community membership needs. And it also talks about the plan focusing on community development, services, parks and recreation, infrastructure, facilities, and increasing non-dues revenue. I think that's pretty much our mandates as like Scott, you're asking what we're supposed to do. That statement in section 8 under purpose, II, is basically what our plan should be consisting of. And I think to a big extent, when you look at the elements that, I've kind of put together, you kind of, you touch base on a lot of that stuff that's in there. And there's maybe even some additional stuff in there. It doesn't get into land use planning at all, but I certainly agree with Mike. Like any organization that owns as much property as Sudden Valley does, we should know what our parcels are that we have. What are they zoned? What are they allowed to be used for without any major permitting? What sort of conditional uses could we do on them with more major permitting? And what sort of uses are just outright not allowed? And there's all three of those scenarios due to the watershed overlay district out here. And so
again, without a doubt, that is an absolute useful function and use of our time, is to figure out what our assets are, and bring this full circle to Kim's proposed mission and vision language. That really is what the guts of that is let's better utilize our assets,
Exactly.
in kind of an enterprising fashion, so that we can figure out how to minimize our dues. That to me is a legitimate aim of this committee to pursue, and we got to understand components of that in order to render intelligent opinions. So I think we're all kind of agreeing, and this is kind of circular.
I think we are. I'd agree with that. I think we're.
And I agree. It was not my intent to suggest that we should dive into the procurement process, but we were given an awful lot of historical information to go through, and I just made a comment about something that struck me as odd.
As far as the land use goes, we have all that information. So again,
Yeah,
just
I
talk
figured
to the
we did.
office, and I mean, we have all that. It's right there on the big map, and it's very broken down. It's very simple. So
Okay.
again, anytime anybody wants to pop in my office, I can
Do we have
pull
that
that
map?
for you real quick.
Do we have that map digitally, Joe, or was that created in GIS or AutoCAD?
I was just going to ask, because I have access to both those software
I don't.
packages.
I'll have to check and see, AJ, how that was created.
Okay.
I know Wilson had it, or I used to be good friends with, or I am still good friends with Wilson's former GIS analyst. So I know that they have had a pretty extensive GIS department, and
They have a pretty good GIS department, but I don't think this was a map that they made. This was prior. Let me see how that's done, and if I can get it, I'll shoot it to you, and we can see if we get a GIS and labeled.
And Joe, if it's okay with you, I'll stop in. I'll set up a time to stop in and meet with you later this week.
Well, as you can see in my background, I am sitting in my house in Park Summit right now.
Okay.
I had some personal business I had to take care of. I will be back late Thursday night. So next week, first part of next week would be great.
Perfect. See you then.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be super helpful to get a digital copy of that. So yeah, we'll look for that from Joe here shortly. As far as the elements of the long range plan, I think kind of the big things we're on right at this moment are community engagement. We're obviously going to be talking about the survey here later, and then mission and vision statement is something we're kind of actively iterating through / getting back into that discussion a bit after 2 months off. And I think we'll kind of have to slowly work through some of this stuff, I think, to get to a point where we can, I don't want to say this, get to a point where I kind of liked what Sonia said about, we can, or Mike said, if, he's comfortable taking on kind of a lead role and looking into the land use planning. And I like the function of like kind of what we had with the survey. Sonia took some time while we were off. She kind of put together a rough draft, helps us visualize things. It starts to spark those kind of creative, juices for some of us people who aren't super survey savvy. I know we have a few people in here who do have some extensive survey experience. And so I think at this point, I think we can the board did task us with starting to kind of look at some of our facilities. So I think at some of our next couple meetings, we'll maybe start to try to dive into some of that stuff as well here. I think maybe our main focus should be on the survey, kind of getting through the content of that, how we'd like it formatted, what sort of questions we'd like to see. I don't know if anyone else, before we move into the survey, if anyone else has anything they want to say as far as the elements of the long range plan go. It's obviously a work in progress.
So I just want to address the little small task force or whatever they are. I think it's real important that, let's say Mike takes the lead on one thing, Mike K or Mike D, whatever's important to them or that they have knowledge of. But I think that we should always have those little subgroups have at least 2 members so that they're checking in with each other. you know what I'm saying? It kind of starts to be a dangerous thing to operate in a vacuum. And because even with the survey, right? Like you say, there's a lot of people, there's several people that have experience with surveys. And so I think it's real important. Like, we know that we're going to have to kind of branch off a little bit when we're working with Josh and IT to just get it set up and implement it. But I think it would be helpful if there's like a couple of us. So there's not just like one person or one dominant personality creating, like, you know, I just want a balanced outcome to whatever we do, so that nobody can say that, you know what I'm saying, that their ideas weren't heard or that they didn't have a voice. And we're not always right. So
Yeah.
it helps, you know.
I am a project manager. I am a huge proponent of forcing my colleagues to review work against their wishes most of the time, because they don't want to spend time doing it. But, you know, we always end up with a better product with more eyes looking at things and more ideas flowing. If we are all thinking the same, then someone isn't thinking.
So I was thinking that it seems like the subgroups would also, force us, like you were saying, AJ, to do work, and to each of us would be responsible for, each group is responsible for a particular issue. I think that's an important thing, and help us also frame our meetings.
Yeah.
Get things done. Yeah.
And some of this stuff too, I think we can discuss, and we can maybe direct other committees, you know, to give us something to start with that they think is important, or we can go to them with something and then have them review it and come back, and there's some more eyes on the product. Yeah. Anyone else have anything before we move on to the survey discussion? All right, so we've had a little bit of discussion I kind of sent the email to everyone, asked everyone to kind of provide some feedback, and we did get some feedback, which I think is good. So a couple things with the survey, and I kind of want to direct this discussion a bit, because I think, you know, there's a number of topics we have to discuss with relation to the survey. And I think we just kind of need to follow a certain order with getting through those things. So the initial thing is, we're planning an online survey. We're working with Josh and the communications committee. They're going to be leading the survey. So it's essentially the long range planning, putting together this survey that's going to be put out by the communications committee. We are in charge with preparing what we want in our survey, what questions we want to ask, how we want those questions formatted, those types of things. And Josh will take that information, create a survey monkey for us. And he has created a friendly redirect URL, which is just like sunvalley.com/survey, that's just a lot easier for people to get to the survey. It's not some survey monkey gives you like this crazy digited, you know, numerical, alphanumerical URL that you have to use. So that'll help. Usually, I know we do this at my work, we use friendly, our communications person calls them friendly URLs. Easy for people to remember and to type in. And so that's kind of the thought with the survey, and we're kind of I'm kind of letting Josh and the communications committee kind of run with the formatting of how that survey monkey is going to look, and we need to come up with the format then of how we want our questions asked, what questions we want to ask, and how we want those structured. So to start, I would like to kind of focus the discussion on the content of the survey and the format of it. And so I'm going to kind of say a few things, not really giving my thoughts, but kind of what I'd be kind of looking to kind of discuss right at this moment. So what Sonia kind of laid out was there's two main sections. One was like an importance. So these amenities or these features of our community, how important are they to you? And then the follow-up question to each of those was, how satisfied are you with that amenity or service that's provided? And then there was another section that was kind of a have you used, and then followed up by a satisfaction rating. And I'm kind of calling that the importance or have you used followed by satisfaction methodology. So some questions I have for the group would be, do we think we want to use that type of methodology? Is that the most beneficial? You know, and then the other thing, there was a couple other things about, there's a few different examples of how to structure questions related to dues and like increases for things and how the association would feel about those. And so
Can I jump in?
I just kind of want to direct the initial discussion around the content of the survey. I know we've had some discussion about timing and that sort of thing, but I think it's important for us to focus on the content first, get through that, then we can discuss kind of timing and how this would look.
So let me just jump in real quick, and this might help. So Adam brought up a good point, and it wasn't real clear when, you know, like I sent the survey, you know, just this draft survey out, but it's real important for us to determine categories, you know, like what, and then we kind of can fill in the questions associated with that, like governance questions, facility questions, services questions, and there's a couple of reasons to do it like that, because at the end of the day, we still have to put that report together. So it helps us to kind of focus on the end result. You know what I'm saying? Even if we randomize those questions once it's online, we still need to break them out so it's easy for the board and the community to understand, you know, what those results really mean. I know Adam made you know, a couple of suggestions about the categories, and I thought they were really good. They kind of almost played right into pretty much what I was using to do it. But I just think it would be helpful if we started at that place and then we kind of, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that was mostly, I wanted to kind of have the discussion about the methodology we use. Do we think like that, how important or how was this for you, and then how satisfied with are you, and kind of discuss, yeah, formatting. You know, the next bullet I had was, you know, what Adam brought up was sections, and I think that goes right into the formatting. I think,
so if you guys could bear with me, just
what's the format we use, and then we can dive into those specific questions that fall within that format.
Okay, so if you give me 1 second, I'll explain real quick why it was set up like that. Doesn't mean it has to be. It was set up like that because, number one, I had originally done them all like separate questions, and it made the survey take an incredibly long time. So kept kind of culling it down. That's number one. But the other thing is that when you judge importance versus the satisfaction level, number one, that's going to help us know what do the community members value, what's most important to them. And then the satisfaction is going to tell you how well is the Sun Valley delivering on that. Because let's say that they think trails are really important and their satisfaction is very dissatisfied, then we know that there's a disconnect and we need to put more effort, more energy, and probably more money into that. Because that's what's important if we have a substantial number of people that are responding that way. So that was the idea behind doing that, because it seemed to be the fastest way to get to those answers. If
everybody on this survey, are the questions matching the elements of the long range plan? Is that the format we're using? because if we have this long range plan with these 7 sections, shouldn't the survey reflect that, so that we're tying the community's concerns and addressing the elements of the long range plan? That's the way my brain works.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I
I
like
don't know.
that
What do you
idea.
guys think? Okay.
Thumbs up. Okay. My brain's just going, these are our elements, and these are the things we want, and we want community input. So shouldn't our survey dovetail that with questions based on each of those bullet points, so that what we're doing is matching our plan, and we're getting that engagement, so we know that we are supported and backed by the community because we already have their input on the elements of our plan.
Well, that just makes too much sense. So,
You know, my husband tells me
Next.
I'm too logical about things, and it's
Yeah.
it's the way the way my noodles go.
It seems like we could, almost form those 7 elements into the kind of higher categories that, maybe there's some subcategories in some of them, but yeah, I'm just looking back and forth at the questions and the elements, and it's like, well, those ones fit there and that fits there. So
Okay.
makes sense.
Well, I think that's a good formatting idea, and I think that it'll be very easy for both us to see how the survey correlates to each of those sections, and the community to see that. And yeah, it connects the brain synapses very easily.
And the other thing that I thought, just to shorten it, from my experience with surveys, is shorter is better, and you just don't want to have people in there that long. I know that these are great, that everything is filled in, but how about just open-ended questions? What have you used in the last 12 months? Then it shortens it, and then people can tell you what they've used, because they don't really need a list of everything to think about what they've used. They know what they've used. Like, I can tell you, when during COVID, I walked on the golf course. I thought it was fabulous. Before COVID, I used the gym. I can tell you what I've used, and I don't need a list to choose from, and it would shorten it and make it less overwhelming.
Well, one thing, Kim, when I read it, I don't think it's overwhelming because it's so broad based, and I really think we do need some data that is broad based, right? And that way we can start saying, oh, look, 75% of the people want our trails to be better, and we can see that, and then we can go in maybe into a subsequent survey and ask those, open-ended questions, I think, because I think if we get open-ended, we're going to have way too much data, and if we really want, it depends upon the purpose of what we want, but it really seems like we've never had a comprehensive survey like this done in Sudden Valley. So we have a felt sense of what we think is important, but we don't really know, it'd be great to know,
They have done some, but it's not consistent. And so we have to, it is, when we see the home turnover rates here, the survey almost has to be done annually just to continue to follow trends and have, a baseline that we can kind of go off of, and we can, it'll help us also see our community engagement rates and stuff, and hopefully our survey, I don't think it's obviously not going to correlate directly with how many people vote necessarily. A lot of people vote that won't take the time to do a survey, which we've clearly seen that statistic play out a lot of times with these surveys. But I think if we're probing the community yearly, they start to kind of expect these things rather than they come out of the blue once every 7 years or so, and then they're like, well, whatever, who cares about that? They forget about it.
Well, and when they start seeing the correlation between what their input and the changes that happen within the community, that they, what I'm saying, then they take ownership and they're invested in it.
Absolutely. That's the key, is to continue to get people engaged, keep them engaged. And that follows right on with, if the community says that these are the priorities, and then they see that those priorities.
Oh, did we lose Mike?
I don't know what happened.
Oh, he's
He's
moving again.
He's frozen.
Mike's got some Wi-Fi issues.
No, I think that one of the really positive things that could come out of this is a year from now, when a statement is put out saying, we did this survey, and based on the results of that survey and the information we received, these are the things we did this year.
That I've heard that from lots of community members of, they would love to see more of, a lot of community members don't want to pour through budgets and look at capital spending reports, and they go blank. They don't want to do that. That's my job. Hell, I don't even want to do that most of the time. We'd all rather do other things. So
yeah, but
having
if
just
you
kind of
can,
that high level overview of here's what you paid and here's what your dues got you.
Well, and what he's saying specifically is, here's the result of the survey, and here's the outcome. What we did this year to implement what you asked for. Right? That's correct, Mike?
exactly, and that gives a lot more credibility to future efforts as well, because it shows that, hey, we listened and we acted.
From an equity lens, I have a concern about it being completely online, and would like to ask that we have paper surveys maybe at the administrative office for people that do not do computers, so that we are making sure that we are gathering and having accessibility for everyone to have their say, regardless of their ability to have online capabilities.
That's a good point.
So just to address that, so the only reason this one we were saying strictly, online, was because we were, my thought was, because it is going to take us time. If we're wanting to develop a survey that's going to act as the baseline going forward, that people are going, like what we're talking about, so everybody can expect it, every year, and it's a full comprehensive survey, and of course throughout the year other targeted surveys, like for the marina or the disc golf, or other areas of importance. But the thing is, the comprehensive survey, then I knew that was going to take more time, and I was concerned with the budget talks are happening, and I just wanted to take advantage of that to start bringing in community input and getting the community involved. So it really, we know it wouldn't be a complete survey, but it was just a way to introduce the community to the long range planning committee and what we're trying to do, and move things forward, and hopefully get more community involvement that way. That was my thought.
And I'd be willing to, have some hours if and when we open the community center, I'd be willing to have some hours to sit down there with a paper survey, should anyone want to come down and fill out a paper survey, if that's an issue, because I don't want to silence anyone, and I certainly don't want to make it that those that we are technologically able and capable, that we have an advantage and a say over those who don't.
Okay.
Well, I think we could even have, events at the gates, at mailboxes or things like that. If people are just driving up to pick up their mail and they have the opportunity to fill out a paper survey on the spot there, take 5 minutes and do something like that. That might be another way to get people engaged.
And maybe this may not be the thing to do during a pandemic, but it seems like there could be a computer set up at the community center that's just logged in online. Somebody can go in, log in, and fill out the survey like that way. I mean,
if they have computer savvy.
This is true. That was in the back of my head. That was rolling. Of course, then they would have to be on computer enough to have an email or some sense of
So
comfort level.
if things change, I did talk with Joshua Bowens, and so the communications committee has a small budget for events, and so we would be working whatever we do throughout the year with communications. And he said they'd be able to utilize, like if we wanted to do like a mini town hall type of an event where we're introducing the survey and explaining it and hopefully getting people to fill it out while they're there, that you know, but we definitely need to start creating that dialogue. And unfortunately, we're in the COVID-19 situation. But if that opens up, then there's other opportunities, other ways that we can dialogue.
Or even I envision, if time is an issue, doing the survey now and gathering that formative data, and then having, once things open back up, allowing the paper surveys, and then adding that to it, so that we can have a summative completion of those thoughts, both online and on paper, but definitely giving people options.
I
Yeah,
have a question about.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the marketing strategy and plan for this too, and sort of the rollout. I'm gonna go ahead and take a shot in the dark and assume that our anticipated participation in this sort of survey is we're not gonna be seeing probably even 40% of the folks in the HOA. And so
15
with
on
that,
the last one we did.
what's that?
We got, I think, Scott, 15%. They did a survey on emergency preparedness last November, and I think we got about 15%.
I think response levels have been about, less than 500 people.
Yeah. Okay. So even thinking about like an accurate sample size, I'm going to assume that it's going to be an uphill battle to try to get, enough folks involved in that to really get a good handle on where people's interests lie. So I just had, a question around, like, is there a sort of marketing plan? Are we working with, the communications folks to develop and execute something along those lines? And then I also wonder about, it feels juvenile, but some sort of an incentive program. Like if you participate in this, you get entered into like a raffle for waiving your HOA dues for the month of September or something like that.
Now you're thinking.
Well, again, that goes back to
raffle.
I like that.
Unless Joe wants to throw that in there, but otherwise we're totally
My question
dependent.
is, where's it going to come from in the budget?
I knew that would come up.
But otherwise, communication, Joshua's already actually brought that up about either giving gift cards or, something, right? Like to like every 100th person or whatever that completes the survey. I don't know. Those are things to be determined, but that's something communications committee is aware of, and they're having conversations about, and they do have a small budget. We don't have a budget, so that's where those things will come from. But by all means, throw out the suggestions.
Actually, Sonia, those things do not come out of that line item.
Yeah, well, I heard that conversation.
they do not come out of those line items. So there would have to be we'd have to find it in another line item. So,
well, I'm still putting it on communications to figure it out. So,
well, I have no problem putting it on communications. I think that's a great thing to let them do. We can throw it on Josh, but we'll have to figure out what line item will come under. So,
okay. All right.
And can we go back? Is it Elise? I want to pronounce your name right. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. I want to go back to what Elise said, because I think that's very important. There's a lot of pulling off a productive survey in the best of times is a real challenge, and we're not in the best of times. There's so many things that have to that need to go into this. From a practical matter, I think Elise, a marketing spin on this is brilliant. I think that has to be an ingredient that we perhaps lacked last fall. There's a legal component to this. particularly when we're talking about polling that's aimed at providing budget input, which ultimately is reflected in your assessments and your dues. So membership, there's some legal stuff, some boxes that need to be checked in terms of notification, ability to participate, adequate time to participate, all these kinds of things. So I don't hear tonight any disagreement, fundamental disagreement about content or the validity of the survey or surveys, or, you know, all this is good. I think we're all holding hands here. I have real concerns about trying to rush something out in this day and age right now that we're living through without being thoughtful enough about the boxes that we need to check. And I think that perhaps one of the last boxes we have to check is really, how do we spin this better than we have in the past so that the response rate goes up? It's dismal, it's miserable, and it cannot, as Kim pointed out, it can't be confined to electronic engagement. We just have to make this easy for people. And easy isn't getting a notice in a week saying, you know, here's the survey, here's all the virtues of the survey, and by the way, we need you to have this back in 10 days. People are going to scratch their head and say, where's this been? And why aren't we given adequate time to think about this? And, you know, we've seen in our own daily lives what can change from week to week to week right now. So I am by no means suggesting we put rocks in the road here. I think this is an absolute fast track. You know, let's push this out as fast as we responsibly can. But in my judgment, we're not talking weeks. I think realistically, we're talking a couple of months to really get our story straight, get it together, get the content correct, and present it properly, as Elise has alluded to our citizenry. And that is going to maximize our response rate. And I'm no Pollyanna. If we could get 40%, that would be outstanding. We're not going to get 40%.
No.
And we're going to get substantially less the shorter the fuse there is. And, you know, I understand the value of this information to the budget process. I absolutely do. But I'm also realist enough to know if it's only, you know, a handful of data points, the finance committee, the board, the membership, it's responsible to say, we can't go forward based on those current, you know, that limited information. So whatever we decide on as a go forward plan as a group, it absolutely has to be pointed at maximizing the response rate, maximizing the engagement, maximizing the notification of membership that this is an undertaking and how important it is.
So some ideas on getting good response, Scott, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Ideas on increasing responses or having incentives. I don't know if where budget, wherever it can come from, but perhaps, you know, so many people, we will draw from so many respondents to this, and one lucky household or two lucky households is going to get a free dinner at Tino's or El Agave. And so incentives always help, even though we should want people to care anyway. But, you know, let's throw something in there for people to motivate them to respond, and offer something from a local business as an incentive.
I like that idea. $100 gift card to El Agave and one to Tino's or something. As
Yeah,
for
support
two
both
people that
businesses.
turned in their surveys randomly, we'd have to figure out how we randomly draw that, I guess. I'm not
That's
sure
easy
how
to
that
do.
would look, but
Yeah.
all right, well,
Just online number
Adam's
generators.
the resident expert on that, so he can take charge.
One of the
And I'd
thoughts.
be perfectly willing to ask Tino's and El Agave to donate those gift certificates.
Yeah, we could go down that road.
One of the thoughts I've had about the survey, and that it's, you know, it's going to be an annual thing, and I think it's like we identify, you know, the month of June as community survey month, or the month of whatever month we settle on, and whatever month works for, you know, putting in the budgeting process and everything else. And it just, you know, that way it gives, you know, surveys are coming out June 1st and they're due the end of June. You have a whole month, you know, we've got incentives and stuff, but it just, it becomes an event, and eventually maybe there's even a big kickoff, you know, community event of, you know, I remember once, I think back when I first got on the Parks and Trails Committee, there was some sort of discovering Sudden Valley community or event that was put together that was pretty cool. That, you know, we just had the committees that were around at that time had
And then
little
I think
pop-up tents and
yeah, we could take advantage when we are able to get back together, which is hopefully sometime in the next decade. You know, being able to plug that at all of the meetings and stuff that are happening, board meetings and other events that are going on, and reminding folks, and even to Kim's point, having potentially paper surveys or a laptop or a couple of laptops set up at those different touch points. And I think the other thing that I'm thinking about is like the opportunity to interface with members, you know, and sort of riffing off of Kim's suggestion of like sitting, if we can be in the space like the community center, being able to sort of take up space there for a bit and help support people filling things out, I guess makes me think of other places that are perhaps not indoors, but are high trafficked right now. And like, could we set up a pop-up tent and a table and have some paper surveys, but mainly maybe be out there to inform the members of what we're trying to do. And you can take this paper survey now, or you can, here's a, you know, postcard that has information on the survey and the URL
QR code
online when you get home, kind of a thing. And then they can also have a chance to meet us or, you know, other board members. And I think that might, I feel, you know, so we're new to the HOA as of November, and one of the things that I was hearing when we first joined was a bit of distrust between like the board and the community members and those sorts of things. And so trying to figure out opportunities for the board and all of its sort of ancillary entities to be able to interface with the public too. And so I see this as one of those potential mechanisms that can help draw attention and give people the opportunity to ask questions as well. Like, well, why should I take this? What am I going to get out of it? And those sorts of things.
So can I interject just real quick? I'm
Sam.
so sorry, Mike. I just, because I know, I understand you're really new, Elise. You know, I'll address the fact of why the surveys have had such dismal responses is because of the very thing you're pointing to, which is the lack of trust with the board. And this particular board has, in one way or the other, been in power for almost since 2002, on, you know, give or take a few people. I think that it is a mistake to align this long-range planning committee with a board. If we're trying to create a community plan for this community, then we need to be, right now, the politics of the board very specifically are weighted. And that is going to, all it's going to do is trigger that mistrust. Again, people don't fill out those surveys because surveys have been misused. They've been altered in the past. And what what we need to be doing is creating trust with the community, but not aligning with the board, because our goal is to create something that is a plan, a strategic long-range plan for this community, not to promote this current board. I think that's a mistake, and that's going to backfire on getting community participation.
Well, and just to build on what Elise was saying, past surveys were not very successful because the people putting the survey out were trying to communicate in a way that they thought was correct, rather than understanding the way that the members want to communicate. So they expected everybody to kind of do it the way they were told, rather than the people doing the survey trying to go out to the community in different ways. Maybe it's
Oh, we lost Mike again.
Happens.
I
That
had,
Wi-Fi,
AJ.
Mike. Are you using CenturyLink over there?
right? I had something I wanted to bring up. What if we
If we
did
want to
a
get the most
series? Oh, he's back.
information, then get out there and do it in ways that help people get engaged.
Mhm.
Are you gonna
Go
tell
ahead,
him?
Steffi. Or actually, Brian was before you, Steffi. I'm sorry.
Okay.
He was before Sonia, technically.
Sorry.
I was just going to chime in, I guess, to the multiple methods of the way we can communicate. And one of those methods is, social media, being able to convey the importance of such a survey. And I think we will be able to do it in a way if we are thorough about our description in a way that promotes that trust that maybe was lacking in the past, perhaps. And I think through the various social media sites related to Sudden Valley, I think we can communicate with a lot of people. And I think a lot of people will be interested in having a voice. So,
Go ahead, Steffi.
Oh, okay. So I had another idea going back to how to get people the incentive to actually participate. And a lot of things are repetition. Like say, you get one and then, I mean, and I'm not here to argue, anyone's point. I say if you get one and you have 10 days to respond, maybe you miss that one, but then there's another one down the road. And then, hey, yeah, you start to take an interest in it, I guess I would say if we started doing a series of small ones, I mean, maybe not for this time, but just to keep that in mind, the repetition of it, just doing it annually. And, also, I wanted to say too, if you give people too long of a deadline, then they tend to push it off and not actually get it done.
Right. And so I talked to Joshua about this, and Adam and Kim, you guys, I'm sure probably have some really good input on that, exactly what Steffi's saying about the timeline. I threw this as far as the 2-week time period again, because this was never, the suggestion was never intended that this was we weren't rushing to do our final, that comprehensive survey that we're going to put out for that annual survey year after year. But this was something to kind of drive community input, get people excited about it, and just allow them some participation this year, because we're a little behind because of the lockdown and everything. So what he said was, if we were doing just the online survey, that generally they have a time, they time out at 2 weeks. That's how they're kind of structured.
Mhm.
My thought had been that if we did that type of survey, then we time it out, but because we now have this tool where these surveys can be accessed, if we structure it where first of all, in order to verify the members, they're going to have to sign in. So right there eliminates a lot of the problems with previous surveys where people were retaking surveys, et cetera, but they're going to be required to sign in. We're going to know that that person's a member. And the other thing is that they can then go back in there and, okay, they missed the deadline. Let's say we put this first one out and it's a 2-week period of time, but we can still leave that survey up. We can leave the survey up if they want to, let's say, take the survey, but they'll know the results for, this time frame have already been released, and here's the results. But we can certainly.
You could close it and then say, did you miss the survey? We're opening it back up. That kind of thing. If you create urgency, then people will do it. It's really weird. If you are trying to give something away, no one wants it. But if you put $5 on it, you'll get 20 interests. You just need to create a little bit of urgency.
I know with our projects at my work, when we do our public outreach and stuff before, we have a major impact to the public, we really try to hone it in and get it to them like not, if we get it to them too early, they'll forget about it, and then we'll get a bunch of calls being like, oh, you didn't tell us, or whatever. And at the same token, if we tell them too late, then they didn't have enough time to prepare. So I think there probably is a sweet spot with the survey and how long it would be out. I think 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty standard time frame. I think I agree with what Steffi said. You create that kind of sense of urgency a little bit and hype around it. I'm hearing a lot of good ideas, and I think Elise kind of triggered this with her, kind of marketing campaign with this. I think, not to table that whole discussion, but I think maybe we should maybe put together kind of a little. Obviously, I don't think this survey is going to be the same as what we want to do on a normal year when we're not in a pandemic. I love the ideas of a town hall to kick off the survey, that everyone could come and do the survey in person, and we can interface as an entire committee, or we invite all of the committees and we have kind of a big, event kind of thing. I think we should that should be a part of our long range plan, and part of our annual survey is what sort of marketing strategy, when we're not in a pandemic, would be a way of this multifaceted approach, and we can kind of create that strategy and the kind of our thoughts. We can run it through Josh and the communications committee and get their thoughts, and maybe try to memorialize that into our long range plan, kind of a process of how we'd like to see the annual survey unfolded to the community every year. I would like to kind of dive back into the content of the survey. I think just to a large extent, it sounded like most of us were pretty comfortable with kind of the importance, or have you used, followed up by a satisfaction rating. Is that a correct assumption? Does anyone have any major concerns with that type of format to the question? If people don't have major concerns, I guess I would like to try to have some discussion tonight about these individual line items that are in this, and we can start maybe call some of those out. I think Kim's alluded to it, a shorter survey is better. I've gone through and kind of labeled some of the stuff that I think maybe we could is redundant, with something else, or we could combine it with something else into kind of one thing, like parks and playgrounds, like we just call them the same thing, things like that. Like maybe we go through some of those, unless people have major concerns with this type of format and what those results would give us.
Now, AJ, if I can, and I mean this very respectfully, but before we get into the details, or begin to edit Sonia's great work, an observation about timing. I've already made my personal opinion clear. I think 2 weeks is unrealistic. I think that's going to do more damage than good. On the other hand, we're going into an election season, not only our own, but more importantly, loftier topics, issues, whatever. You use the term the sweet spot. I think there is a sweet spot here. And I think, just thinking out loud, I think we're going to want this survey delivered to the membership very thoughtfully, legally, all the boxes checked, probably within 2 months. And here's why. Because if let's say we point at September to get it out, and we can decide amongst ourselves, whether 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, the period that it's out there, whether it's we close it and reopen it, all those are good thoughts. But we don't want this to get lost come election season. And so I think maybe what's realistic is we begin to work methodically towards rolling it out in maybe September. close it in September. The results are available going forward at that point to the board, to, people that want to run for the board, whatever. But the body of information is there at that point in time. And my fear is that if we're not successful rolling it out kind of under that time frame, we're probably realistically into first quarter next year, because you hit the election season, you hit the holidays, all the stuff, and who knows what this world's going to look like between now and then. But again, to use your term, in my judgment, our sweet spot is kind of late summer, early fall, before election season just heats up and all this is lost. So for what that's,
I think, I don't really want to get in too much to full on time. It's hard to discuss timing when we don't even have like a survey and content even put together. For me, I mean, realistically, whether we can get, I don't think we need to let perfection be the enemy of better necessarily. I guess for me at this point, we have to cull the survey and get to a point where we're feeling comfortable with what it actually looks like and how it's structured, before we can even get to timing. So, I'd like to spend that time doing the content, not getting into a debate on the timing. I think we get through the content, we put the survey together, and then we'll have a time frame. Basically, once we get the survey together, we can get it up online fairly quickly. Once we get our proper notices and stuff out to our members via our different platforms. Elise talked about a marketing strategy. I'd love to create something for non-COVID times this year. I think, I think we could do a few paper copies down at the office and stuff like that. I am a little hesitant to send people meeting up with other people and with mandatory mask restrictions and stuff. But I think we can definitely do that to allow the people who can't get onto a computer to do that. And I don't think, my guess is we wouldn't have such a huge turnout in those paper copies that it would be an inundating task to incorporate them into the electronic results. But kind of going through some of these tasks, like I'd like to start having just some discussions on some of these tasks, whether they need to be in there, whether they don't. I'll give some examples. Like Christ the King Church is like the fourth or fifth one in the first section. I hesitant to put like a private entity that's not Sudden Valley in that section. I think that would be better served down in the have you used section. It's kind of it's not really an amenity, but it's like kind of that outside services. We have a number of athletic trainer type people, I think, that, come and do classes and stuff for people. And we have other various things like kind of Christ the King kind of falls into that category in my eyes, as like a outside service that we rent or allow to use our facilities, to benefit the community. There's little things like on that plan, it says road maintenance, and under that it's like sustainable roads plan for routine maintenance, snow removal, roadside mowing. I think some of that is redundant. I think most of that's good. I would just say like take out road maintenance. I think having a sustainable roads plan for routine maintenance, a snow removal plan, and seeing the importance of those things. Those are, we already know everyone's going to say snow removal is super important.
No, hey, AJ, I'm going to chime in there. Snow removal is an operational thing. That's not a long range.
Yeah, this is, to some extent, I think it's trying to gather information on the services that we provide to the community as well.
The
Yeah, I'm
question,
not saying we're using it's not necessarily something that has to be incorporated into the long range plan necessarily, but I think most certain snow removal is always a hot topic, as you know, Joe, and having and I think we already know it's going to be one of those things that's in the 4 or 5 very important category. But with the satisfaction thing, it'd be really nice to see how that, you know, how we rate that as a community as importance and how satisfied we are with what we've been getting, you know, and it would have been nice to kind of see that data from before you started, and when we kind of altered the snow plan, we added the baby plow, which was a fan favorite.
We
And
need to
that
see
type
that
of
info
thing.
too, from based on the snow year as well. I mean, you know, we've had years out here where I think the plows hit the ground once, and that was just barely, and you know, that was a great snow year. It didn't cost any money probably, and you know, and then years where it was like, you know, 3-4 major storms and everyone was a challenge.
yeah.
And I would contend too, Joe, that like this is feel free if you think there's stuff that would be important for staff to, you know, gauge from the community. I think we'd love to hear your input on things. I don't think this has to be fully just for long range planning. You know, if we're going to have this annual survey and create these baselines, I think we want to cover all of our bases for long range planning for sure. But I think to some extent we could see, you know, things get added or removed from this over time.
Well, I would say, you know, with the long range stuff and then your yearly survey, I think your yearly survey would be something that you would try to capture more of the snow removal, things of that nature. The long range plan that we should look at right now is where are we going to go, and what's the roadmap, and what are we going to do. So then I think the yearly survey would be, you know, what have you used, what haven't you used, what do you like, what didn't you like, what was your feedback on all that on the yearly surveys.
And I think that's what AJ is addressing is just the survey, right? The survey questions, not so much what we're doing.
My thoughts are, do you want to try to inundate them with all, you know, of these surveys? Right. You know, Steffi brought up, or I think it was Steffi, like survey, or someone brought up survey month, like that's like a thing in Sudden Valley. Was that you, Adam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. I think that's a great idea. We can promote that. That can be part of the marketing strategy, you know, and then it becomes this regular thing where everyone can kind of prep their minds for it and they can think about it. And I think tying it, there is no time in Sudden Valley like budget time. Everyone starts paying attention during budget season in Sudden Valley compared to any other time of the year. And budget season pretty much rolls straight into election season as well. So it's like that time frame here is kind of, you know, the prime time for when a lot of people are starting to engage. You know, people tend to take time, you know, everyone has to take time off to kind of recharge and, you know, not think about everything.
Can I interject? Sorry, let me interject again. But, you know, Adam kind of brought this up, you know, in his email, you know, but basically, I think, you know, we have to decide, are we just focusing on, as far as surveys and the annual formal assessment of community needs? Are we going to focus on that, or are we going to do a twofold thing where we're going to do a smaller survey to allow input prior to the board finalizing the budget? So they're actually kind of two different things, because if we're going to do a survey that where we're letting people have input for you know, to the board basically on decisions that are upcoming this next year, then we can kind of focus on that, focus on topics you know, that are current or that will be occurring within the next 12 months. And then we spend more time, like what Scott suggested, where we're implementing basically the baseline annual survey. And I'm just talking about surveys, by the way, not the actual 3, 5, and 10-year plan that you're talking about, Joe. But I agree with you on that too. I mean, that's part of why we need to put. I kind of threw it together, but it's a suggestion. I mean, everything is just a suggestion. It's certainly not me trying to direct it. It was just to get us moving forward, so that we're setting these goals and we're setting a time frame, so that we just solidify some of this and know what we're moving towards and what are the dates that we need to hit. So I'm just curious, does everybody, who's interested in doing it kind of that way, where we're talking about a shorter survey that's just to get community input, get them excited about participating, and be able to give feedback to the board regarding the next 12 months and the budgeting process. And meanwhile, we work on basically Scott's suggestion of, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, getting, promoting it, marketing it, etc., where we're trying to get the maximum amount of input. That'll probably take us a minimum of 2 months to do all of that.
So my take on that, Sonia, is that in theory, I think it's great to get community feedback for the board meeting. My concern for that is the overuse of surveys and consistently going to people with questions. It's my gut opinion that the more you question people, they're like, well, didn't I just fill out a survey? What was that other survey for? So I think that it needs to be more strategic, and so that when we're going to them, we're not going back again and then back again. Oh, now what do you think of the parks? Oh, now what do you think of the budget? Oh, now what do you think of the golf course? I mean, I feel like we should consolidate our asks and then heavily promote it, because there's a lot of work, like Elise was saying, and Adam with that marketing piece, getting people up and going and getting people motivated about it. And we don't want to keep doing that over and over.
If we get a survey that we only get 500 responses back, and they're mixed all over the place, 250 here, 100 there, and whatnot, what kind of a tool is that really? Because it just says that, okay, there's 500 people in this community that have the ability to take the survey or care enough to do it. Probably a mix of both.
I think we have to ask ourselves the question, are we doing a survey to help the board get information for the budget for next year and for their actions next year? Or are we doing a survey to provide this committee with information that we need to put together the long-range plan? Those are two different surveys.
They're two different surveys, but my goal really wasn't so much about giving the board a tool so much as to give the community a venue for input. And one of the things, like under our purpose, is doing a formal assessment of membership needs annually. And my concern was because we, because of the lockdown and everything, we're kind of behind. And I just was, for me, trying to ensure that we implement something during this year, where the community could go, hey, this long range planning committee's moving forward. And, that was really, it's that simple. I'm real focused on allowing people to have a voice. And that's one of the reasons I, joined the long range planning committee. And it kind of hurts my heart a little bit to think that they're not going to be able to do that before budget decisions are made. But I agree.
I have to agree with Mike that focus is key. And honestly, the way you worded it, Mike, was like, yeah, wouldn't that be the board's responsibility to get input on the budget versus the long range planning committees?
Finance committee at that rate.
or finance committee so that we are focusing on what we're cut out to do. Although, Sonia, I hear your heart about wanting the community to have that input on the budget. I just don't know if that's our role.
Well, according to the bylaws, it actually is our role. That was the other thing, because part of it is that once we actually do implement the, we finalize and come to this plan or even an existing plan, part of our role is to work alongside the finance committee to be sure that they are adhering to the plan. And the board's role is to basically ensure that the community plan is followed. So it does become basically a task, a duty of the members of the long range planning to kind of oversee that community plan. The problem is that we just haven't had a plan, a cohesive. I know that there was a plan written 20 years ago. Nobody follows it. It's not adhered to, et cetera. And so I'm just saying that is ultimately, even though right now it's not one of our responsibilities, it ultimately is a responsibility as the bylaws are currently written of the Long Range Planning Committee.
Sonia, excuse me, we're absolutely fulfilling our responsibility. By my calendar, we first convened in what, January, or was it February?
It was February.
I think it was. Okay. And we lost a couple months for arguably some pretty good reasons. We're on pace. We're talking about rolling out a comprehensive, the best survey this community has seen ever this year, months into this community's function. I think we're right on pace. So I'm not going to be apologetic about, failing to fulfill our duties, because I don't think that's the case at all.
And you've written it, Sonia, and I wouldn't say walk it back at this point in time, because I really think that it's an important, it's so, when I saw it, I was like, holy smokes, this is exactly, because we don't know who we are as a community. We are a heterogeneous group of people. We need to know who we are, and I think for long range planning to do its work, we need to kind of understand who we are as a community, and that's what your survey does.
Well, and that's actually my point. And I was just addressing the fact of Kim's statement, and it doesn't mean that's who long range planning is today, but ultimately, that's who long range planning is supposed to be. Is that once we have that, like what you're saying, once we're sure, and we've developed not only that community plan, but a flexible, sustainable plan, then whoever is on long range planning, they're going to have a responsibility to oversee that and work with finance and work with the board to ensure that was what I was saying to Kim. I wasn't implying that we needed to be doing that today, because like you say, we don't have focus right now.
Should we be reaching out to the finance committee to get their input on this survey?
I think to some extent, I think we kind of have to put together, I think we kind of want a more, I'm not going to call it a final. I like to call things, there's like, in my eyes, there's typically kind of 3 iterations. Maybe there's a 4th, depending, and this could be one of those things where there's 4, but there's the initial rough draft, then you got kind of a final rough draft, and then you finalize everything up after, kind of 2 comment periods on documents, is kind of how I typically do a lot of, kind of what I do when I put together formal reports and stuff like this. It could turn into an additional kind of 3rd comment and edit period. That's, that obviously happens. I think, to a large extent, I think if we just kind of work, it's getting to be almost 8 o'clock, and I don't want to take up your, this, we don't need to be board meetings. We were there late last night. So I think, if we can work toward, I think what I'm hearing is most people are in agreement that we probably want to be more focusing on our annual survey, as opposed to a budget-driven survey. I tend to agree with Kim. An inundation of surveys will increase complacency in response rates, and what Steffi said, just creating that sense of urgency. And then I think we have to figure out a way to incentivize it as well. Come up with a couple gift cards to give away to 2 to 5 people or something like that. We'll figure out how we pay for that or something. I'm willing to chip in $20 to get some participation. I don't know. We can figure that out. We can go to the board and ask for a couple $100 or something. I don't know. We have that option to ask them. So
you almost want an incentive for the first 100 people to respond or something. So, there's like right away, there's like a reason to get in. Like, if you're one of the first 100 people to respond, you're in the raffle, or, the better raffle.
Yeah, but then if the back 500 people or 700 people we want responding are like, well, I didn't get in the raffle, so.
Well, you gotta have a couple raffles.
How about the first 1,000? Right?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
How about the
first 3,000, Brian? Let's just go big.
That would be awesome.
How about everybody that responds by the 15th of the month gets into a big raffle, and then everyone who responds by the end of the month gets into a smaller raffle?
Yeah, we could do something like that. We'll have to figure that out. I don't know how that all works with asking for money, so I can talk with Joe and Ann.
AJ, who are you going to ask?
I have no idea how it works.
I think, hey, AJ, I think
guess
that's
I'll make a
something
motion to ask for money out of UDR.
No, I think, AJ, when we get to that, you and I can figure something out.
Okay.
Yeah, because
and I like the idea of asking for donations too. I think, Cruz is great, and, he may be willing to donate. If we buy one gift card, he'll match one or something. I don't know. We'll talk to him, see what he'll do. I know I frequent.
I can put
when it was open, and I frequent their bar quite a bit. So
I'll donate a bottle of red.
Nice.
Oh, there we go.
okay, so obviously I'm constantly setting schedules, and I'm hoping somebody else on this committee feels the same way I do, because I think it's real important that whatever we decide, which it sounds like we decided that we're not going to move forward with just a survey to try to get some input prior to the budget decision. So we're focusing, as far as surveys or community input, that part we're focusing on the annual. So then we're at the place of, I know, AJ, I understand what you're saying about let's see how it goes and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that if we're wanting to implement it, then we kind of have to have a time frame of when we are talking.
Deadlines. As a procrastinator, I typically need deadlines.
So how do you all feel about what Scott said? He said that he was suggesting September. Now, the thing is, like Adam, I agree with Adam, we need to do it at the same time every year. So will September, you think September, that's like.
I think to some extent, just at one point, I think we can. This year's a bit special. We got behind a little bit. If there's a specific time of the year that we're not necessarily hitting that we think in the future is the survey month we want to do, I think we should do that. And I think we just, at this point, we create a schedule to move a survey forward from right now to just put it out, moving it forward, continuously moving it forward here until we get it out. But we can have that discussion as a part of our marketing strategy for future years on, with the town hall, and when do we want that schedule to be? Because we also, if we're doing like a big town hall, like June has extra finance committee meetings for budgets. July has extra board meetings. We want to think about that. I don't want to be inundated with like 12 meetings in a month and a town hall to prepare for. Like that would just get crazy. I'll never see my kids.
Well, and I'm thinking that we change the board 2 months after that too. I almost feel like
I think
earlier
we want
in
to
the
time it so
year.
that the new board maybe is, I think to some extent we should have that conversation maybe at our next meeting, because it's getting a little late. It's almost
Okay,
8.
so
We're 2
let's,
hours in. I don't really like to keep you guys more than 2 hours. I don't feel like, and then we still have to do property owner comments if there is any. There's 4 attendees. So
I really appreciated everybody's great ideas. It's wonderful to be in a group with you.
Just to follow up on Sonia and a schedule, I think that let's finish that off. I think for me, I'd like to see us cull down the survey into, like Kim said, into the sections of our long range plan. Maybe there's some additional sections in the survey that, Joe would like to see some data points and stuff, or staff has some things they'd like to see added, and let's start to try to cull that down maybe by the end of this month. And then, try to have for our next meeting, I would like that final draft that we can then maybe present to communications committee. We could present it to any of the committees to get additional feedback that we feel we need to, and we kind of spend basically the month of July trying to gather that feedback, and then in August we're looking at starting to try to push that thing out. If we've gotten the feedback we need. If we don't, then maybe we're looking at right there in September.
yeah, because we'll need to
what our marketing strategy will be for this year, and then we can also have one for normal years where we're not quarantined.
Yeah, just keep in mind that we have to give communications committee a heads up. They'll need notice, because like if there's going to be postcards or anything or promotional materials, that type of thing takes a little bit of time. So
yeah, I think we need to discuss that too at the next meeting. So I think we probably want a marketing strategy agenda item for our next meeting to go along with kind of hopefully a more finalized draft version of our survey with more people's thoughts on what things we don't need in here by the next meeting, which would be middle of July. If we felt like we needed to, we could always call. If we wanted to, we could call a meeting earlier in the month. We do technically have meetings scheduled for the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of every month, but we've agreed to just kind of do once a month. If we feel like we're in a spot where we could, when we've gotten what we want to get done and we're ready to kind of discuss the next step, we could have it, be the first, the July meeting could be the earlier Tuesday instead of the later one, or if we're not there yet, we'll have it at the later one. We can kind of go based on what people's schedules and availability are. Okay, well, does that sound reasonable to everyone, that by the end of the month we start to if everyone can kind of give their input on which sort of things we can remove, what things are redundant, what things we'd like to add, that type of thing. And then we can rework the survey draft, and then at that point I think we'd be more prepared to actually put something in the agenda packet and stuff too for the community to see.
Works for me.
Okay.
I like it.
Yep, I like it.
All right, well, we're supposed to talk about core defined values. I'm going to call it that we're just talking about that at the next meeting if there's time. If people could give suggestions via email I provided a few core values that I thought would be good for the association. If people could just maybe provide their values that they think, and we can make a master list. And then same with what we talked about with the mission and vision statement, we try to do a share screen type thing and start to kind of pass through some of those topics. But I don't want to get into a big discussion on that right now because we'll end up being here till 8:30 at least.
Right, and
So-
if we all submit our core values, then I'm sure we'll see a lot of them cross-reference each other.
Sure.
We'll just knock it out.
So let's have everyone submit that, and then I can maybe try to do another Facebook post on the core values discussion and try to get some additional community input that way. We did manage to get some input on the mission and vision statement doing that. So yeah.
All right.
So I guess I will, if anyone else has anything they feel like they need to add right now, let's do that, and then we'll move to property owner comments. All right, any property owner comments out there? Looks like we got Linda.
Linda.
Go ahead and bring her on in.
Good evening, Linda.
Good morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, indeed. That's what it is for me when I don't have to participate. I only had a couple of comments for you guys. Basically, July through September is going to start the candidate time when they can submit their applications. Had to do with Scott's question. AJ, you may want to, Jamie just sent the board an updated calendar, because there's that date that I asked to have changed for when they would make the final, to approve, it isn't to approve, to adopt the budget. And if you want to have an impact on that, you may want to look at it. That calendar also has a couple of town halls on it in August. I don't know if that helps you guys, but I think you should look at that calendar, and it's got a real wealth of information of where basically N&E and the board are at with their process.
Okay, that sounds good. I think, yeah, I mean, obviously budget and election season are the two biggest times people start to get involved, and then we see, winter and spring and beginning of summer, and people are, doing other things. So yeah, we'll take a look at that, and I think that'd be good. You guys, you said you have town halls. Are you thinking that that's actually, or you're going to try to plan like a virtual town hall, or are you trying to, because I thought, if we wanted to, we could try it. I don't know. I'd have to talk more with John, and I don't want to get into this right now, but maybe there's some way to pull that off with Zoom. I don't know. Could get chaotic.
Just take a look at the calendar and stuff. It may give you guys some ideas of when you may want to put stuff forward. If they do have a virtual town hall, an opportunity for you guys to speak a little bit on the stuff you're doing. And as to Kim and paper copies of of that, in the past, unless it's a huge survey, they've put it in the views too. And then you simply cut out the pages, or you get them to do it so it's just a page in the views that people can fill out, and submit.
Fabulous.
It's just she had said that, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the fact that in the past they have used the views.
Yeah,
so that's all I got, guys.
I figured it would be a good idea to advertise in the views at the very least, so we could look into that then too, including the whole survey if it's not too many pages.
Yep, that's all I got for you guys. It's just to have you suggest that you look at the board and budget calendar, because it kind of tells you what everybody's going to be doing. That's all.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Good.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Any of the other three property owners would like to talk?
There's this little raise your hand icon there. Should be down at the bottom of Zoom. Doesn't look like
All right. I don't think so. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Let's get out of here.
Second.
All right. Thank you, guys. Sorry I kept you for 2 full hours.
Okay, AJ.